Well, good afternoon. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to join us for this post-2025 AMA's committee meeting on October 27th. I am Warren Tenney, with a co-chair for this committee, along with my fellow co-chair, Cheryl Lombard. And we have very much appreciated the conversation and discussions that we have had over the last few months since summer to talk about solution phases. I just want to remind everyone that we certainly welcome input throughout this meeting. And if you have a question or if you have a comment, please just note in the chat room, and Cheryl and I will make sure we'll keep track of that and be able to call on you as soon as we can. In the chat room, ADWR just put in information on if you run into any technical issues, so please note that. So let's go ahead and just dive right into why we're here today. So next slide, please. So since June of 2021, our committee has been in what we call the solutions phase. We've been wanting to identify, talk about possible ideas that could address three primary issues. As you recall, the committee had identified 6, and we decided at this time that it would be best to really focus on groundwater in the Assured Water Supply Program, unreplenished groundwater withdrawals, and hydrologic disconnect. And our objective has been that we would look at the various issues, look at these issues holistically, try to then develop realistic ideas that could develop into strategies and solutions, and that hopefully then the committee could support those strategies and solutions to address those 3 issues. Our objective has been that we want to present to the Governor's Water Council before the end of this year about what our general consensus proposal would be. And since the Governor's Water Council is meeting on November 30th, that's our target date now. And we recognized right from the beginning that that in our conversations, as we thought of different ideas that could address those 3 issues, that we would probably put together quite a long list of issues. And so, but for today, we wanted to try to focus on what we think we could accomplish as a recommendation to the Governor's Water Council at their November 30th meeting. So we've all along understood that we would continue to have discussions to develop additional strategies and solutions well into 2022. So next slide, and Cheryl.
So first off, thank you. This has been quite a few months. We've been busy. Thank you, Warren. Thank you to DWR staff. You have been amazing. I want to just reiterate that you've kept Warren and I on task. And I also really want to thank everyone on the committee. This has been very interactive. It didn't start out that positive in my eyes, but I think we have rallied around at least some concepts, and now we're here to talk about them. So in evaluating the proposals, Warren and I felt that it was breaking them down into 3 buckets. We're not only looking at legislation, but we're also looking at rules and policy. And hopefully, I'm going off the assumption that all of you saw the email yesterday. I believe it was from Jenna that had the attachment with the actual document, which has the proposals. If you do not have it, please say so in the chat. because we're going to keep this a little bit of a high level. So if you do not have the full list of what we're talking about, again, put that in the chat. But we are going to, that document captured everything we heard. Everything is still alive, but Warren and I felt that it was best to narrow things down to what we're calling a 2021 package, just to come up with some criteria. The first criteria is to address more than one challenge or opportunity, which we've been saying this from day one. That's what you're going to see today as the hypothetical items that Warren, I think, are potentially ripe to move forward to the full Governor's Council. The second and third bullet on our criteria are what we're here to talk about today. Gain general overall support from the committee. I don't view that as complete consensus, meaning everyone agrees, but it's just hearing everyone, and we'll have another bite at this apple to rediscuss this at a future meeting potentially. Then the last, a little bit we want to hear, we've also been doing some feedback, is politically viable in the 2022 legislative session. That's a big one. People may disagree on that, but we want to hear from you on that. So again, the goal from today is really to talk about those last two criteria and if what we've put together meets them, and if we've missed anything. So next slide.
So this is the list of the proposals that we are including in the 2021 package for this committee. We, as Cheryl noted, we did send out, or Jenna sent out on our behalf yesterday, the written document, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at it, but we still want to walk through that, and it is on the website if you want to track it down. But just to walk through real quick what the package is looking like, it is includes 7 proposals. The first 2 are probably more, well, they are more of a activity for ADWR to pursue that we would like ADWR to do. And then the remaining 5 would most likely involve legislative action. So just walk through real quickly with you on these. The first one is to improve regulatory process for recharge and recovery. We heard a number of you bring up issues in regards to the recharge and recovery program. And so this is to help address that. Also to amend the ADWR volumetric accounting policy for commingled water supplies. We also included on here, remove water bud restrictions, and also would like to add the establishment of a cut to the aquifer for annual storage and recovery outside of the area of impact. Something that we've heard throughout this committee process has been the importance of augmentation. And we decided to put in here, and it touches on, and we'll talk in more detail shortly on this, but to establish a mechanism or structure for augmentation in the AMAs. Since we are focused on the AMAs, we feel it's important to keep that focus on the AMAs because there certainly is a need for augmentation in the AMAs. And then the last 2, one is to accelerate ADEQ's development of administrative rules for direct potable reuse, and also look at the land status tax policy to decrease groundwater mining in the AMAs. And so what we would like to do is to go in more detail on each of the 7 proposals that are part of this 21 package, get your thoughts and input. And again, please indicate in the chat room if you'd like to have a question or would like to make a comment, because we certainly want to have a robust discussion today with all of you to make sure that this, just see what your thoughts are, and see if we can have that general agreement from the committee on being able to move it forward to the Water Council. So next slide, and I'll turn it back to Cheryl.
Thank you. And again, I'm going to take these first two. This would really be helpful to be interactive. Warren and I have been chatting with not only DWR, but with Tom and the governor's office about these items, but we want to look at this as a package. Each of these, somebody likes this because they may get this. So that's a little bit of the reasoning into why some of these are in here. And answering Kathy, I want to take them issue by issue. So after I do the improve the regulatory process for recharge, we'll do that discussion. But again, what Warren and I got feedback is some of these things go together, as you may hear. As well, I know many people are going to be frustrated, and we'll start with the frustrating one first, because there's a long list of issues that have been going on for a while, and we're trying to move those forward. Obviously, DWR is dealing with a lot of issues, whether it's Colorado River or so forth, but this first issue is we're putting on the heading, remove the regulatory process for recharge and recovery. The list of the at least 4 items we heard was in the full document, i.e. unreasonable harm standard, modeling, cut to the aquifer. When we spoke with the department, again, the busyness is hard, but these are important to try to move forward. So what we have recommended is to begin a stakeholder engagement process, whether it be by the department or so forth. We'd love to get your feedback specifically on the list. If there are items we are missing on that list for the stakeholder process, I do know, you know, some are more important than the others, but I'd love to get your feedback on this. Doug Dunham, if you want to go first.
Sure. First of all, would like to compliment you and your co-chair Warren on all the work that you've put into this. Lots of effort happening, and obviously this could not be done without the detailed support from the department. So kudos to staff. On this, I think both the chairs have heard this from me before. I think we can paint this as part of the continual improvement process the department has been engaged in over the last few years, and not a specific complaint about the department. And however, I would also like to include in this discussion with the department a review of the assured water supply process as well, because I think these two programs work hand in hand, and you can't really just do one without the other. So I'd like to expand this to both programs.
Thank you, Doug. We'll add that. Next, I see Spencer.
In the interest of time, I will just I just agree wholeheartedly with Doug's comments, and would love the inclusion of the assured water supply program.
So noted. Thank you, Spencer. Any other comments?
Cheryl, I'll just add here while people, in case some folks are trying to type something in the chat room. We certainly, Cheryl and I want to recognize that the department has been working on different aspects of the recharge and recovery program, and has been looking at some issues. Some they have been working to try to address. So this certainly is, we certainly want to acknowledge that, but at the same time, it was from the comments that we heard from all of the committee that it was important to do a comprehensive review of the recharge and recovery program, and then get input from stakeholders, and that could be of value to us as a state, and particularly here in the AMAs, as we move forward with the various issues that we're all dealing with here in the AMAs. So I just wanted to add that.
And we can go back because again, like I said, some of these trigger other things when we get to them. So we can certainly go back. I want to move to this next one. It was a suggestion. I think it was at our first meeting when we were starting to focus in on the different papers and solutions. And it, you know, the true tension that you're probably picking up is from strengthening the assured water supply versus potentially where we are in the assured water supply. And that tug and pull is going on. It's been going on for these past several months. But this recommendation is hopefully something that we can do via rules or policy, I guess. And it is to help meet physical availability. And it's we had the large discussion, I think it was when Jeff was doing the presentation of Pinal model, and really how can we use Harquahala water or not, and whether it would be direct delivery. And this recommendation came up in terms of volumetric accounting policy. So we have tried to capture it and just want to open that up for feedback.
Looks like Doug has a point of clarification.
And go forward, Doug.
Yeah, thanks, Warren and Cheryl. I just would like to point out, clarify that what we've been discussing on this point is in the Assured Water Supply Program, and how to look at adding new physical availability with commingled supplies. It's not necessarily trying to get into the department's way that they manage for the conservation programs. So the department has had a long-standing concern that you may want to funnel, a provider may attempt to game the system and funnel renewable supplies to a specific user so that it can get out from under some of the conservation requirements, and that's not necessarily what we're looking at here. It's strictly assured supply issues.
Thank you, Doug. Well put. And we're seeing some comments. Krista put hers in, Krista Majunkin. Krista, do you want to add anything besides what's in the chat in terms of just the new solutions require the flexibility? All right, next we'll go to Laura Gregnano.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Cheryl and Warren, again, for all the work that you've done as co-chairs on this committee, and ADWR staff for supporting this work. It's definitely been a long journey and a lot of hard issues being addressed. I just wanted to make a few comments from the GRD in terms of the volumetric accounting policy. I think many folks know that in the past, the GRD has had some concerns with HOAs being able to wheel water supplies through water providers. And this is similar in a kind of expanding that to a developer. I think we understand, though, the reasons behind this and the issue that this proposed solution is trying to solve. And I think there's a lot of really good reasons for it. It would be a way for developers to essentially bring in their own renewable supplies to meet their needs for their new developments, and in turn would essentially reduce or eliminate the need to enroll in the CAGRD, or at least reduce reliance on the GRD. So I think there's a lot of merits in this. I think obviously, though, we would like to be a part of furthering in the details in this discussion with the committee and with ADWR to make sure that, you know, if CAGRD in some cases is used as a backup or security, if groundwater in the future may need to be used for that development, that there's some safeguards put into place that would allow the GRD to essentially be able to meet the replenishment needs of that development if it's called upon to do so in the future. I think one of the reasons there we have in statute limited time to collect replenishment reserve fees, and we wouldn't be collecting infrastructure and water rights fees. And so if a developer would then in the future need to turn to the GRD to meet replenishment requirements for whatever reason it might be, we might not have the supplies in hand or the finances to meet those needs. So those are some of the safeguards that I'm referring to. So anyway, I think we're supportive of this, but just want to make sure that that we take into consideration some of those issues the GRD might face in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Well said. And kind of going to a little bit of that point, Michelle Benquathan, if because I know this was, I'll say part of it was your bigger idea here. So if you want to speak on to your comment. Michelle, we can't hear you.
Hello, sorry, I had to get a headset on.
Oh, no worries. Sorry to give you that
Yes,
surprise.
I just wanted to point out that there will be circumstances where, for instance, you have a large industrial user that wants to bring their own sustainable water or has to bring their own sustainable water under a lot of the new large user policies. And so we need to keep that in mind and not just make the volumetric and commingling changes for assured water supply purposes.
Okay. Thanks, Michelle. Anyone else in terms of comments? I see your comment, Krista. Okay. Brett Fleck.
Hi, thanks for your time. This proposed policy change is pretty technical, obviously, and I guess I don't quite understand all of the ramifications right now. So I guess a couple of questions more broadly. Has anyone done a deep dive into this so that the non-super technical folks can understand what this is trying to get at? Maybe like a pros and cons paper or something like that. I'm not aware of that. And I guess the broader question is how would this change improve Arizona water management from a sustainability perspective or move us closer to safe yield? That would be useful. And then lastly, I share some of the concerns that I think Laura Gregnano had couched as some things we need to kind of watch out for, like ensuring that the CAGRD has sufficient funding to acquire water supplies for its replenishment obligation should this policy go through and someone, whatever entity jump on or off of providing their own water. So we'd just be looking for some more information on this one.
For sure. Thank you, Brett. And Michelle wants to comment to your first overall question. Michelle?
Yes, Brett, I will give you what I think the history of this policy is and what effects it has. I think Laura has stated CAGRD's case, and I agree with her that I think it's great that CAGRD is speaking out. We need to make sure that CAGRD is able to make its function happen when it needs to be happening. And to the extent that we can get people to use sustainable supplies directly rather than CAGRD, I think we could make that work for everyone. However, the volumetric accounting policy, as I understand it, was for one reason, sort of, and it's an unwritten policy, by the way, as far as I know, was sort of implemented by the Department of Water Resources to make sure that any water that physically contained groundwater was sort of infected with groundwater. So they peanut buttered all of the water supplies by proportion over every direction that they went. And part of the reason for that was to make sure that people, water providers such as Peoria, could not game the groundwater conservation requirements by crediting certain water to certain users in a way that would be advantageous to avoiding conservation requirements. And my answer to that is maybe volumetric accounting is not the way to address jurisdiction over conservation requirements. Maybe we should just address conservation requirement jurisdiction instead of trying to loop it in with this volumetric accounting problem. And so that was one of the issues. Obviously, there are some supplies that do have certain restrictions on where they're used, so we'll need to address those as well. But it's just, it should be a policy that allows the water provider to determine where water goes in its system for accounting purposes, provide maximum flexibility, make sure that everybody's following conservation requirements for groundwater if there's groundwater physically in the system. And I think that takes care of the concerns that we have.
Thank you, Michelle. Kathy, I see your comments. I'm going to come back to you, or that you agree if you want to say anything. But Dave Roberts, you put in the chat. Do you want to talk about this more, or just you're elaborating on how it would help industrial users? Anyway, it's a way for them to use renewable supplies. Kathy, do you want to add anything? And I know Brett has a response as well. All right, Brett, we'll go to you.
Oh yeah, no, no response. I don't know. It sounds like a good
A follow-up.
explanation. Yeah, I guess I wasn't looking at this from a conservation sort of loophole, if you want to call it that, poorly on my terms. I was more looking at this from the fact that sort of this unsubdivided exemption from assured water supply rules, allowing folks to sort of purchase their own water supply and not sort of contribute to the greater good for a water provider to move towards renewable supplies for everyone. I can just say that I use this example often, but it's really struck to me as at the city of Peoria that we purchased the New River Utility Company in 2015, and at that time, I've learned since then that utility has about 18 to 1900 acre feet of total demand. However, about 400 acre feet of that demand associated with things like unsubdivided lots for schools, for example, have no replenishment obligations. So that new school was built using water that is just mined because of the unsubdivided exemption and the assured water supply rules. So I was more approaching this volumetric accounting for how this change might allow, incentivize, encourage, provide access to more development that would be on unreplenished groundwater. So that's kind of how I'm looking at this, is how these things impact and play in with the unsubdivided exemption.
Thank you, Brett. Laura, I'll come back to you. Rob Anderson, do you want to add something to what Michelle said, and especially in light of what Brett just said?
Yeah, this isn't, yeah, I can't get to the unreplenished groundwater use within his service area. I'm not, this doesn't really do anything for that. I just wanted to make one point when you're sort of, for the layman, where is this coming from? I think one of the issues here is that we're running into limits of physical availability on groundwater. And the way the models are run is the long-term storage credits are taken out of the model at the very front end. So these are credits that are being protected by DWR. And it is one way to utilize an existing, and I guess we'd call it a renewable resource. These credits were created through recharge of renewable water. So that's another one of the basis for doing this, is that this allows somebody who can't show physical availability to show water that's actually there and that's actually protected in a model. And it's particularly important in areas where the water provider is not designated. Where you have designated providers, of course, they have, all of them have portfolio, you do too, all of them have portfolios with long-term storage credits that they rely on, and they allow this. This is trying to allow a developer within a non-designated provider to be able to use long-term storage credits. That's the general idea.
Thank you, Rob. Laura Gregnano.
Thanks, Cheryl. I just wanted to clarify, I believe that this, as it's written, is really, and I think Rob just kind of clarified that, but in our reading of this, this is pertaining to developer bringing in a supply to to wheel through essentially a water provider's service area. I think my concerns would be would be higher if this was a water provider itself being able to wheel specific water supplies through its system without peanut buttering it over, as Michelle mentioned, if that makes sense. I think as it's written now, this is just talking about developers bringing new supplies to water providers themselves and not water providers themselves doing this. Just wanted to make that clarification.
Gretchen Baumgartner, you have a question.
I do, thank you. And that actually, Laura, your last comment there kind of helped me too. I understand this concept in this policy as it relates to a developer or how the developer interacts with the GRD and bring in water. And my question is though, if we open this up to an actual policy put into place, are there unforeseen consequences to it affecting how a designated provider could be affected by how it moves water? I think that's a concern of mine.
And probably, and Doug Dunham, let's see, now I'm losing here. Doug Dunham, do you want to add your comment? So it's about renewables being brought in instead of groundwater.
Yeah, I think I understand Brett's concern that he laid out that in my mind this would help alleviate that in that we're not adding to new groundwater demands. This would allow more easily to bring in renewable supplies. And if it's a renewable supply and it is a development that is a subdivision, then that should fall under the requirements of assured water supply for it to be actually brought to bear, and therefore it would relieve, because it's renewable, relieve any additional pressure on the GRD.
And Aisha, you had, you can address the issue about designated providers, or did we get that covered?
Hi, this is Aisha. I just wanted to clarify that the issue of commingling and volumetric accounting that I believe you all are discussing applies to certificates of assured water supply and potentially analyses, but generally certificates. It doesn't apply in the issue doesn't come up in the context of a designated provider, generally speaking, because designated providers are the provider and they're in charge of utilizing their water supplies, and it's generally understood that they are providing a mix of supplies to their customers, and unless it is a single supply system. And I guess to Kathy's comment, a commingled supply, as far as what I understand, and I think actually to take a step back, it's probably important for us to establish a definition for that, so we're all operating from the same understanding. But commingled supplies, practically speaking, in the Assured Water Supply Program, are when a water provider is providing more than one type of groundwater, more than one type of water in its system to its customers.
Thank you. Michelle, did you want to add? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is Gretchen again. I guess if we are going to go open this up and actually make this more of a substantive policy, I think I want us to make that distinction between a designated and a certificated provider. That would just be my comment. Thank you.
Okay, that's Michelle, did you want to add anything? You had.
I'm just frustrated. There's a little bit of confusion in our discussion, and part of it's because I think the volumetric accounting policy is not written down anywhere. I have some documents from 1997 or 1999 where one was discussed and not adopted. And so that's what I'm working from. And it was really a water provider issue. It wasn't necessarily just an assured water supply issue. It didn't deal with CAGRD because this was kind of way back when. What it was basically saying, you know, as opposed to a wheeling agreement where the developer has a private right and private permits in the developer's name and wheels its water through the water provider system, what we're arguing for in getting rid of volumetric accounting is to allow a water provider to have control over the allocation of their own water supplies. And so they could do a deal with a developer like Microsoft, say, for example, and say, Microsoft, we are going to accept your CAP lease and we are going to give it to you at your location. And Microsoft would not need any permits. Microsoft would just have an agreement with the water provider, and the water provider would account for that water as going to Microsoft's meters. So that's really what I'm arguing for, is that we need to give water providers more flexibility, just like an irrigation district has, to account for their water in the way that they see fit. And if that creates problems, and I think CAGRD has identified one potential problem, then we need to address those problems. The conservation's another problem, but this doesn't necessarily just revolve around assured water supply. So this is more of a just an accounting issue, but it does come up in assured water supply context, certainly.
Laura, did you want to reply to that? And then we'll get into these other comments.
Yes, thanks, Cheryl. Yes, so I think there are even additional, issues of if that's expanded, if that's really what we're looking at, that we'll need to take a look at, because there's also depending on when subdivisions were built, we have minimum reporting requirements for subdivisions, and some water providers are serving, pre and post 2004 subdivisions, which have different minimum reporting requirements to the CAGRD. And so opening that up, I think, does to the water provider themselves and not just the certificate, I think in my mind opens up some more questions that we'll want to address. Thanks.
So let's go back up. Sandy Favorites, I think you had a question, was a designation.
Yeah, no, and Michelle really hit on it in her follow-up on the designation. It's not really about a designation or a certificate, in the general scheme of things. It is a water provider issue, and bringing in new industry or new commercial development or whatever, and having the ability to require them potentially to bring their own water to the table. This would allow them to do that. And I think it actually works well under either a certificate or a designation, and could actually improve things. I think we just need to line this out. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding and might be overcomplicating it. If we can just, because I would suggest that we proceed with it and let the group sort of line it out in a little bit more detail so that folks can understand it better. It actually is it would be a really good tool, and it might help actually reduce groundwater pumping. So I think we just need to make sure that everybody understands the issue a little better.
Thank you, Sandy. That was exactly why it is in here. So I want to be conscious of time. We're capturing all of this. What we need to do is to line it out a little better, what we're talking about for the next meeting and final report before we take it to the Governor's Council is what I'm going to recommend here. And Kathy, did you want to talk? Kathy Ferris, because I know you've had a few other comments here. Okay, so we're gonna, because Kathy's not feeling comfortable bringing it to the council, so we're gonna do what Sandy suggested in terms of lining it out with more detail to understand, and with the understanding this is trying to take pressure off of groundwater.
And Cheryl, it looks like Dave, Brett, and Natalie both wrote in some comments. It might be worth just reading out loud real quick to help with the discussion, if you want to.
I was just trying to wrap it up. I mean, maybe
Oh.
people could read this, and we're gonna move on to the next steps in terms of
Sure.
lining it up more, narrowing it down so we can have a specific discussion.
Perfect.
Okay, next slide, please. Because I know we're going to have much more discussion now. So this came up in, it's come up in many different ways. So waterbud, those of you who sat through DCP, this was talked about. It was talked about before that. It came up during our discussions. What we are putting forward, and again, these are trade-offs in terms of what we've heard from multiple people, that I can do this if maybe we do that. So I want to keep that in mind. And maybe we present these two together. This is dealing with long-term storage credits. And we're talking about allowing entities to accrue or buy regardless of their groundwater pumping. This has been through many, many, many discussions. I think we are narrowing it down in terms of what needs to be done. It also in terms of the impacts maybe are not as great, or the concerns are not as great, but this is the opportunity to speak up in this issue, on this topic of waterbed. And this would be a legislative change. Spencer.
Yeah, we've had concerns on that. I just wanted to express to everybody that we've had concerns about this issue for a couple of years. We continue to have concerns. Doug Dunham's been kind enough to hold a meeting with me in a couple weeks to try and set me straight. We'll see if he's successful.
Thank you for mentioning that, Spencer, especially the latter. Michelle.
Sorry, I didn't even mean to talk today, but the waterbed change is also important for incentivizing new projects. We need to be able to bring long-term storage credits to a provider that is mining groundwater at different locations from their other system for reasons that have nothing to do with their mining. For example, EPCOR may be mining in some areas of the state and not in others, and we may need to bring long-term storage credits for a project to a balanced system. It's just that entity under the waterbed is not supposed to be mining anywhere in the AMA, so it's a problem. I have a project currently that's pending that will be bringing long-term storage credits for 100 years for an assured water supply certificate to a provider. The provider is actually designated, so they are in balance, they're not mining. But if that provider wasn't designated, I couldn't do it. So I'd have to do it through some silly wheeling agreement and have a property owners association managing water that doesn't know what they're doing, and so it's a silliness that needs to go away.
Doug, you made me laugh. So we look forward to hearing how Spencer and Doug's meeting comes out. Hopefully you're having it before our next meeting. Brett Fleck.
Unlike Michelle, I did come to this meeting intending to speak. So please bear with me. With waterbed, I've had the chance to study this pretty in depth, and my understanding of it has evolved over time, and I think hopefully increased. But there's still some things out there with a complete waterbed repeal that I guess make me uncomfortable from a regional policy standpoint, part of which has to do with what repealing WaterBud will do to demand for CAP water as we enter deeper shortages. I think a previous analysis a few years ago showed that there's somewhere in the range of 30 to 40,000 acre feet of additional demand that might sort of be freed up or created, or however you want to say that, by the repeal of WaterBud. Obviously, there's an impact on the market for long-term storage credits by having a lot more entities in the game, so to speak. There are other issues that again go back to the unsubdivided exemption of having providers mine groundwater for unreplenished users, while at the same time accruing value for credits. That just seems, I guess, unfair. But to really just say leave one comment here that I think would maybe be beneficial to the group is, at least in the last number of years, WaterBud has been described as a relic of water policy, et cetera. I completely disagree with that, but we don't need to get into that. But I think there maybe is some room for some modifications to WaterBud, or partial repeals that get at sort of the silliness that Michelle described, some common sense solutions that still leave the essence of the WaterBud protections for regional management in place. So I just wanted to say that I think maybe looking at some more limited adjustments would be more palatable to a lot of folks.
Thank you, Brett. In the full paper, we talked about full repeal versus limited repeal, which you touched on. And also in terms of legislative items, they're going to go to the full council, but then there will be further legislative stakeholder meetings. So with that, I'm going to turn to Sandy. You had a comment.
Yeah, it's really kind of a response to what Brett was saying. And I think, again, there's a lot of confusion on this stuff. And this one strikes me as odd that on one breath, people are saying we need to get off of groundwater. So people are trying to get off of groundwater by using their CAP that they paid for, that they've been paying for since, the beginning of CAP, but you can't use it. But we want you to get off of groundwater. This will get people off of groundwater. And if yeah, Brent, Brett's vehemently shaking his head. It will help get people off of groundwater if you can switch them to CAP water. I agree that we need to look at, obviously Brett's going to have his opinion and he's going to continue to to shake his head at me, but this is an issue I think that people need to understand better and really get at the issue of does it help or does it not help, folks who have been paying for their CAP water for a very long time, and enable them, just like everybody else, to use that water that they're entitled to.
I do want to put out Michelle's comment. I'm not going to make her speak again. There seems to be a lot of work around WaterBud just via agreement. So in terms of transparency and practice is what at least Michelle is talking about addressing. And then Terry Sue, do you want to? I mean, a lot of this is going on in chat. It's in terms of the regional benefits of WaterBud.
Brett just had a lot of things to say, and I was just hoping he might describe a few of them in the chat so that I could have it.
I will let you guys go on then, because this will have a lot more of a life. Let's see, Eric Braun. Do you want to add, or do we want to continue this in the chat? Eric.
Yeah, my only question is, I know that WaterBud tends to affect private water companies a little bit more than municipal. And I thought that there was also some corporation commission rules that might hinder the use of CAP for those private entities. I'm not aware what they are, but I just wanted to know if there's maybe a little bit more comprehensive look at this that we need to do to make sure that those entities can use their CAP water. And we don't take out one of the roadblocks and not all of them.
I appreciate that. And I see one of our private water companies has the answer to that. Doug Dunham.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, great question there, Eric. At this point, let me speak for our systems. At this point, there is no hindrance from the Corporation Commission for the use of CAP water. They recognize it as a renewable supply that needs to be brought in. It's an asset to utilities, helps utilities offset their groundwater demand, which extends the viability of the systems, and the costs associated with that can be passed through like any other utility related expense, for example, power costs. So we really don't face that anymore.
Thank you, Doug. Any other questions? And again, the next item, we can go back to water, Bud, but I want to go ahead and move to this next one, which is establishing a cut to the aquifer for annual storage and recovery outside the area of impact. Again, this is with the intent to decrease unreplenished groundwater pumping and incentivizing where this is done. Any comments or questions? Spencer.
Yeah, my comment really just goes back to kind of the conversations we've had about this in the area of impact in the past. It's kind of, what are we talking about? What's the, how many situations would this impact or not? My recollection is from the presentations we had, this is not really taking place much at all from the presentation. So it's not that I'm opposed. I just think we need more information about where this is taking place, which I'm still not clear on.
Thank you. Doug Dunham, do you want to answer that question?
No, this is just a general comment on this proposal. I would be adamantly opposed to this without the elimination of WaterBud, because we have one set of the rules, statutes telling me I can't store and use my CAP allocation where is most efficient for me. And at the same time, you're now proposing, because you're forcing me to store it in some other inappropriate location, you're going to take half my water away from me that my customers have to pay for. It's wholly unfair when you force me to do that, and essentially have to give up a portion of my allocation and pushing that cost to my customers.
Thank you, Doug. And Terry Sue.
We would also not support the establishment of a cut to the aquifer. And again, I think this gets back to Sandy's comments, and I support what Doug just said. Our idea of improving these policies and these rules and these statutes is about making it possible for people who have held these CAP subcontracts for, as long as we've held them, and giving them the opportunity to use them. And I just feel like we still keep heading down this path of figuring out ways to make it harder for us to use our CAP water instead of easier. And that just seems to me to be antithetical of what we're actually trying to accomplish, unless what we're really trying to accomplish is to make it hard for people to use their CAP allocations. And that might be what's in fact going on.
Thank you, Terry Sue. Dee, I know you've posted your statement. Do you want to make any comment?
Hello, thank you. I just wanted to post the statement from my director. who would respectfully like to be able to meet with the co-chairs on this item and the next one specifically.
So noted, and you're with the City of Tucson, so thank you. And we will get that set up. Brett.
So I'll try to be briefer here. The City of Peoria generally supports efforts to reduce, actually, let me say this another way, supports efforts to move towards safe yield. So if a cut to the aquifer that incentivizes tying recharge and recovery locations helps with that, we would support that. However, that would come with a caveat that obviously that cut to the aquifer, as the private water companies have pointed out, is a costly cut. And we would like to see support from other sectors and moving towards safe yield in order to, throw our full weight behind this. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. I think we have covered the various points of view. With that, I think we are, and thank you, Gretchen. Scottsdale echoes Brett's comments, so we have that noted. I think we are ready for the next slide.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about a pretty straightforward idea that Cheryl and I both recognize is going to need more conversation. But as I mentioned at the beginning, augmentation has come up many times in our discussions. And while the intent or the focus of the post-2025 committee has been what can we do in regards with management of the AMAs, Cheryl and I both, looking at this, have come to the conclusion that there needs to be a concerted effort to try to develop new water supplies in the AMAs. We do not know exactly what this mechanism or structure would look like, but we feel it is important to have a recommendation acknowledging that interested entities should be able to collaborate and combine resources to obtain new supplies and build the necessary infrastructure. This could possibly range anywhere from allowing a group of water providers to collectively issue bonding for a regional water project, or it may be something more complex, as such as an authority that could pursue new supplies on behalf of its members, or it's somewhere in between. But putting this on as one of the proposals, we thought it also is a way to link to another idea that had been brought up, and that was establishing a new groundwater fee or increasing the existing groundwater withdrawal fee. Such a fee could incentivize using less groundwater while generating funds for a specific proposal. We anticipate that augmentation is going to be discussed again by the legislature in 2022. So we felt it was important for this committee to weigh in and voice the importance of augmentation for the AMAs. So that is our thought in regards to this, and recognize that a lot more discussion is needed. So please let me know who would like to talk. Kathy, is this, I'm assuming you're saying you'd like to comment on this issue?
Yes. Yes.
Please go ahead.
So what you have written here and what you were talking about, like, are almost two different things. And there's a lot of moving parts here. The issues surrounding augmentation, and especially an augmentation authority, are extraordinarily complicated. And as history has demonstrated, they're not easily solved. And anyone who participated in the Add Water process for 5 years that came to naught understands this. So it's confusing to me as to how this really it got here on this agenda today. It relying on augmentation to solve unreplenished groundwater pumping is pretty much wishful thinking, I think. Folks are pumping groundwater because it's cheap, and they wouldn't be able to afford more expensive water supplies. And additionally, if it's used for new development, it seems like those who benefit from that should pay for it. And so mixing this all up with the mine groundwater tax gets very complicated in my mind. I just don't think this one is ready for prime time. It's got a whole slug of issues, and it will take lots and lots and lots of effort to try to sort them out. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Jake, you have a comment?
Hi, Warren, Cheryl, thank you for all your work on this. I agree with Kathy that it's a pretty big deal to bring this up and talk about it, but I would agree and doubly so with the fact that we have to do it, right? I think it's incumbent upon us to talk about this and tackle the hard details here. So I just wanted to say I fully support us working on thoughts and pathways for augmentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Jake. Other comments?
Sure.
Wade, please go ahead.
Speaking from the perspective of a statewide water augmentation plan that the Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee is embarking upon, this certainly has to be part of it. And the goal and object of the Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee is going to be to compile and to coordinate and to work on those issues that, as Kathy correctly identified, were impossible. But as we all recognize, the impossible has got to be done under the present circumstances. The drought has forced us to find water and to augment supplies. And so we're going to do that. And I think this represents good ideas, concepts, and principles. The plan is not going to come in and take over projects that are in progress. It probably will end up supporting projects in progress, but this particular proposal is going to gain traction simply because it has to. So I encourage the further development of this concept.
Thank you, Wade. Rob Anderson.
Yeah, so I as somebody with went through the 5 years of Adwater with Kathy, she's exactly right with all of the issues that have to be addressed and the complications of this and all the struggles that we're going to have and all the issues we're going to have. But I have to join with Wade and Jake and just say this conversation needs to continue. We have to talk about this mechanism, exactly what it looks like. A lot of work to do, a lot of complexity to it. Kathy, I think rightfully connects the mine groundwater tax with an augmentation authority. Exactly what does that mean? Maybe that's not a good idea. But I think we have to do this. We have to have a mechanism for augmenting supplies. I think what Wade had said about, we've got a lot of pressures, and so we need to do this. I'm strongly in favor of moving this forward.
Thank you, Rob. Spencer.
Just generally speaking and listen to everybody's comments, I don't think anybody's against augmentation. Obviously, there's a lot of efforts on that front. I think your proposal, though, has too much detail, and I think I would recommend that you make it more of a goal than a detailed proposal. Your funding sources, I think, are going to create a lot of problems, and so my recommendation is to take that kind of detail out if it moves forward.
Okay. Thank you, Spencer. Terry Sue?
Well, I was just sort of wondering if this can't already be done. I mean, don't we have the ability within our MAs to do these kinds of things? I mean, what would prevent us from doing that now if we wanted to? What do we need some sort of a legal structure or mechanism of structure that can't we already do that with agreements and that kind of thing now?
I'm not exactly sure of the answer, other than since perhaps because it hasn't been done yet, therefore folks are assuming that more is needed. But and then Kathy just said yes. And I'm assuming, Kathy, that means yes to the yes. If folks wanted to do something now, they could.
Yes, they could.
Okay, yeah. And so if we're going to move forward with some sort of a structure, and I mean, of all the things that we've heard today, I actually like this idea better than a lot of the other ideas. But what I want to make sure is that if we're going to do something like this, that that the structure is designed to sort of bring common interests together. I also was involved in the Adwater process, and my take on why that didn't go where it needed to go, was because there were some very different interests in the room. And so once you put two very diverse interests or more in a room, it's very hard to come to an agreement. So if we create these mechanisms to develop a water supply in a particular area, it's important that everyone in that group have a similar objective, which would be to bring a water supply in. If you have some people who are sort of have an anti-ambition in that direction, it creates problems.
Thank you, Terry Sue. Doug?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for bringing up Adwater. And now I'm going through more PTSD from that process. No, seriously, to follow up with Kathy and was saying there, and Terry Sue as well. There already exists a lot of these authorities, and so maybe to follow up on what Spencer was saying, if there's too much going on in this one proposal, maybe we can focus on ways to support the existing authorities. I mean, the director has the authority to retire rights. There's other ways that water users can be brought together to put certain deals together, that kind of thing, for the benefit of the whole. And maybe we could start with that.
Thank you, Doug. Yes, with your comment and others, it always is useful to go back into the statutes and see what type of authorities already exist and see if those fit, if they would work with the current circumstances of today. And as on the slide points out, are they set up in a way to allow interested entities to be able to then collaborate and combine resources to pursue new supplies? So that's a good point. Any other comments? Kathy wrote, 3 entities could get together and combine their funding capacities. When you ask folks who don't benefit to pay, then you run into problems. I don't disagree from that statement. And then maybe this should be more like a strategic direction of ADWR, and that's from Terry Sue. I think what Cheryl and I, the reason Cheryl and I put this on here, and perhaps maybe there is too much detail on it, but I think it goes to sort of the sentiment that Wade expressed, that augmentation is going to be something that's going to be discussed and continue to be looked at by the legislature. And we felt it was important to at least state to the Governor's Water Council, or recommend, I should say, to the Governor's Water Council, that augmentation is important to the AMAs, and that they're either using existing supplies that have been mentioned, or looking in another way, that there still should be a coordinated, focused effort to develop new supplies in the AMAs and allow interested entities to collaborate and combine resources to obtain new supplies and build necessary infrastructure. As far as with the funding of using groundwater withdrawal fees, that was really just building on, that was our attempt to include one of the recommendations that had been made in a discussion on how to reduce unreplenished groundwater pumping. I'm not seeing any additional comments, except for the clarification from Terry Sue that her comment regarding strategic direction of ADWR to facilitate this kind of thing. Oh, Sandy, you have a comment.
Yeah, no, it's just, thinking about this, it's just difficult to wrap my mind around what we're trying to do here. I mean, 3 people, 3 interested parties, or any number of interested parties, could come together today and collaborate and do a project and all that. I still think this just needs to be a little more clear on the focus. Is it to go find water, or is it to allocate out water that might have been found? Or, what really are we trying to accomplish with this? Or is it administering a fund in some way with, specific criteria? It's just a little too, it's kind of hard to wrap my mind around this one on what we're trying to get to. And, if we want to give DWR money and use withdrawal fees, or do some other mechanism, general fund or whatever, you guys go find water. That's great. I don't know that we need a, or you want to create a new mechanism to do that. That's sort of one focus that, could be had. But WIFA has authority to, give money. I mean, we set that up under the WRDC for WIFA to, expend, monies that were collected, I think, in the Water Resource Development Fund. So I'm still just having a little bit of struggle trying to figure this one out.
No, thank you, Sandy. That's the type of feedback that, and your feedback and everyone else's comments is what we wanted to hear, and what we this helps us figure out how best to proceed. Michelle had a comment that I'd like to see a change in law to clarify that CFDs are authorized to purchase and fund water resources obtained elsewhere for use within the CFD. So, Joe Singleton, you have a comment to Michelle's point?
Yeah, thanks, Warren. Michelle, we ran a bill that, among other things, did kind of address that, and there wasn't a ton of support in the development community to kind of get that across the finish line. So we're currently debating whether or not that's something we want to try again.
Thanks, Joe. I think people should support it. They don't need to use it, but they could support it.
If
Thanks.
I can pipe in on CFDs before Spencer talks, because Spencer will maybe echo and or disagree with me, because Valley Partnership ran CFD bill just trying to fix how it was working in general. But I think everyone should be open to better uses of what CFDs can do to help facilitate. It's part of building infrastructure. So.
Thank you, Cheryl. And then Spencer.
Yeah, there's a long, ugly history of fighting within the development community on CFDs, and some of that's been generated by my association. We have major concerns with the creation and use of them, just generally speaking, and we do have pretty significant concerns using CFDs to purchase water. And we think there are some kind of legal issues that need to be worked out and reviewed. My current directive from my board is to oppose the use of CFDs for the purchase of water. Even though we wouldn't be opposed to talking to people about it, but my current direction is we're pretty adamantly opposed to that.
Thank you, Spencer. Well, I think all of these comments point out that there needs to be more conversation and discussion. A lot of these things, certainly we had the add water process. I remember it very well as other discussions of regional authorities and other ideas that have come up and come and gone over time. And I think in echoing some of the comments made earlier, that it's really important that we continue to have this communication and conversation, because where we are here towards the end of 2021 is very different from what we maybe had, what our circumstances looked at 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So we will continue to work on this. Let's go to the next slide and see what comments we can get on these last two. These are the last two of the 7 parts of this package proposal. So the first one would show our intent is we want to be able to communicate to the Governor's Water Council that there is stakeholder support that there's that we as stakeholders here in this committee feel that there's a benefit to our respective communities for ADEQ to develop the administrative rules necessary for direct potable reuse. We know that DEQ is working on this, but we also know that process and getting rules changed and such can be difficult. And so we want to make sure that ADEQ has the resources to be able to accelerate the updating of the Arizona Administrative Code for direct potable reuse. And any comments on that? I'm seeing, if I'm keeping track of these, Henry Day, you have a comment. And I'll note though that Michelle said, yes, DPR now. So Henry, take it away.
Yes, thanks, Warren. I guess I'm definitely in support of direct potable reuse, but I think that it's you have to use a little bit of caution, because what this is an additional beneficial use, because much is being already beneficially used for turf and golf courses and industry and agriculture, and all water doesn't need to be treated to the highest level. Water Reuse Association has been really pushing direct potable reuse almost to the expense of other beneficial uses. So it's simply that caution that it is an augmentation, another beneficial use.
Thank you, Henry. Jake agreed to Michelle's yes comment, and then Gretchen, you have Gretchen Baumgartner, you had a question.
I didn't have a question. I just had a comment. As
Or comment,
Scottsdale, the only demonstration pilot permit for it, and I actually tasted it yesterday, and it was awesome and delicious. I want to support this, but I wanted to just echo that verbally.
Thank you, Gretchen. And then Marie Light, in regards to this proposal, said support the existing proposal 100%. An additional source of renewable water can be harvested rainwater. Harvested rainwater, filtered and disinfected prior to delivery to a point of use, can offset potable water supplies approximately 50%. This renewable source could reduce the long-term, not short-term consumption of potable water supplies. Additions to the AAC could include, one, identifying harvested rainwater as a source of potable water, and two, recommend requirements for system components ensuring delivery of clean water. Thank you, Marie. And then Brett, you're noting that the city of Peoria strongly agrees with this proposal. Joe agrees with this proposal. Doug, you have a comment.
I guess I just would echo what Henry mentioned, that, you know, we all as large providers out here we've been telling everybody for years that we use reuse 100% of a wastewater that we generate. So all that effluent goes to reuse, and whether it's going to parks or landscaping or green belts or industrial use, it gets used. So DPR isn't really going to give us a new bucket of water. It's just a new type of water. And I think while I support this remaining in the proposals moving forward, I just want to make sure that everybody goes into it with their eyes wide open, that this isn't a brand new bucket of water. We're just recategorizing, and we're going to have to treat it to a little higher level than what we're doing now. And does that supply get taken away from our golf courses or our parks, and then we pump more groundwater to replace that? So anyway, that's all I have to say about that, to quote famous movie.
Well, thank you, Doug. Ron says, yes, let's keep this in our recommendations. That was Ron Doba. And then Jake Lenderking.
Thanks, Warren. I think it can be a very valuable supply for our future. I don't disagree with what Doug was saying or previously Henry Day, but I do want to point out that our landscapes and golf courses and stuff are using less water. They're shrinking. We're seeing development of those spaces being smaller. And as a response, we're seeing, our wastewater treatment plant effluent or recycled water increasing relative to the demand just in general. And I think that's a trend that we're going to continue to build. Here at Global Water, we've been thinking about and planning on the principle that water is scarce. And today we have about a 43% return from potable water that we actually turn into recycled water. And, we'd like to think about that differently and to think about how we can use it. And I wanted to highlight that not every water right and physically available water supply out there is equal. And there are places in the state that are going to really need something, even if it's small. To Doug's point, this is not the panacea or silver bullet, but I think that need is going to be very strong, and I really want to keep this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. I think that's what Cheryl and I's intent are when we included this on the list. Is it's an opportunity for us to remind ourselves of that Arizona has been a leader in water reuse for many, many years, even decades of advancing, of reusing over and over our water. And this proposal is not meant to, certainly doesn't diminish what we have done in putting to use effluent over the years. It's just another tool or another way to be able to continue to use that effluent resource. And I'm not sure if I skipped over, but Joe Singleton said also that he supports this proposal. Any other comments on this one? So let's look at the last one. So the last proposal arose from a larger concept that had been mentioned about incentivizing retirement of agricultural land. And the thought was if we were able to add temporary and permanent fallowing as a classification to the ag tax status, it would allow landowners to voluntarily cease mining groundwater while still be able to retain their current tax rate. And so that was the thought with this one, and we'd welcome any comments. Patrick Bray, please.
Thank you, Warren. So the agricultural tax status currently recognizes temporary fallowing, which we put in place knowing what was coming down the pipe for Pinal County. But you can use that all across the state. I think that the agricultural community would be open to talking about permanent fallowing programs or fallowing programs. But I think that our preference is that you look at it for paying someone not to farm, like a CRP program that the federal government does for, conservation lands, that type of thing. I don't think that messing with the tax status or adding additional language in that region of the statute is beneficial for state and for policy that is designed there to recognize the outputs of the land on the farming side, and then the values the grazing stuff as well. So it doesn't necessarily recognize how not using water that you keep the land at the same value, which is a valuation based on what the land produces. So we're not opposed to talking about permanent conservation programs, but using the tax statute to do so, I don't think is appropriate, and we certainly would oppose that.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Other comments? Michael Curtis says that the Hohokam district agrees there is a need for more than just the tax status approach and concurs with Patrick Bray. Joe, you have a comment.
Yeah, just fuel for the fire. I'd point out regarding the second bullet on there that not every AMA has the same management goal anyway.
Right.
So I think if this is a discussion we're going to pursue, you need to tread lightly.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Anybody else? Eric, you have a question.
Yeah, thanks. I am a little surprised by those comments. I always understood that there was like a 5-year tax exemption that would be a problem for any land that was fallowed any longer than that. And that was kind of my assumption as to why that was included in this list of ideas. That was always something that was mentioned as a reason why we couldn't do long-term fallowing programs. But if that's not the case anymore, then I guess I can see why there's. Honestly, I can't see why there's actually opposition to this. It just seems like it was one barrier that was in the way for the larger picture, unless the idea is that we don't want to take down one barrier without doing the whole thing. And maybe that's what the approach that the industry is taking.
Okay. Patrick, are you going to answer Eric's question?
Yes. Simply, the statute requires that in terms of drought, we kind of clarified there that you have to have, it really only works inside irrigation districts, that the irrigation district has to say, we do not have the water to provide you. Therefore, you cannot, your land is not productive. And so that is what triggers the ability to fallow the land and keep the ground at ag status. There is also a provision in there that says for acts of God, which we've always interpreted would be drought scenarios. But I think what the group is getting at is they want to quit production on farmland to use the water elsewhere. And our comment is that is not a tax policy. That is a fallowing program and a different policy that we are willing to have that discussion that does not relate to or have to deal with our tax policy.
Thank you, Patrick. That's important clarification to have. And then Carol Ward makes a very true statement here that reducing groundwater withdrawals does contribute to the management goals of all the AMAs. So whether this proposal would reduce groundwater withdrawals or not, we're clearly having that discussion, but I agree that we should see whatever we can do to continue to reduce groundwater withdrawals. Any other comments? Well, Spencer, you have a comment, and Michael Curtis just echoed agreement with Patrick Bray's comment. Spencer?
Yeah, I would just say that, this proposal seems to be targeted at ag. We talked through a number of entities that engage in unreplenishment groundwater mining, and we don't have any proposals targeted at that use too. I would agree that reducing groundwater withdrawals does contribute to the management goals, but we're only looking at one sector. And I just find that ironic that there's other uses that go on, mining that goes on.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the idea of, I think Cheryl and I put this proposal on the list because we had, I think, similar assumptions as Eric Brown had expressed, that we thought that this might be something that would be desired and that it would be helpful in helping to work on this. But agree that all sectors, there is more that we can all do in looking at how to use less groundwater and contribute to whatever our AMA's management goal is. So, Cheryl, I am sensing that we have gotten comments, or pretty much most of the comments that we're going to get at this time on the 7 proposals that we went through. Do you, why don't we go to the next slide, and you could share about, note that we are fully aware that there's other proposals that we have heard in this committee.
Yeah, thank you, Warren. And going back to some of my original slides that I was speaking on today, we're really looking at these proposals with the lens of the criteria Warren and I established, which was addressing more than one issue, but what we've been talking about today in terms of general agreement by committee members, but also then the political viability. And so this list, and also keeping our word of keeping track of everything that was said, all the suggestions that we heard throughout the actual 4 meetings we had, because last meeting we did have a special discussion about the Prescott AMA and the exempt well concept. So this is the remainder of the suggestions that we heard during the past several months. If anyone wants to speak to any of them, I don't really want to go through reading them, but they are all very important, and they will continue further discussion as this committee continues. But we were trying to narrow down to what we could actually move forward in the coming year as potential legislation, policy, or rules. So to answer Kathy's question, the continuing the management plans, that is something that is with the full committee.
The full
That
council.
the council, sorry, that Tom had brought up in terms of working with Representative Griffin. Okay, we appreciate everyone's input on these. They are all very important. After we get through going to the full council, we will address how we're going to get back to these in 2022. But Kathy, you have a comment.
Well, I sense that we're getting to the end of the meeting. Am I correct?
Well, I'm going to get to the next steps in the next slide. So
Okay, well, then I will
in terms
wait.
of what we've
No,
heard,
go
so you may
ahead.
want to save your comment.
No, go ahead. I'll wait till you're done.
Okay. Spencer has a comment.
Well, it may be premature as well, but if we're going to move away from the list, I just wanted to bring up that first kind of issue we discussed about recharge and recovery. We talked about the assured water, including the assured water supply program, and I wasn't sure how we left that, and just wanted to get clarity because I don't think we're going to discuss.
Let's wait till the next slide.
Okay.
Cool. Anyone else on the list that's not going to be moved forward? All right, next slide. So we put, if necessary, it's necessary that we have a meeting on November 9th. From my notes that I heard that still have issues, first is clarity on volumetric accounting and defining that. The second is dealing with what Spencer just brought up. Actually, probably that's first, and I just want to kind of go through the list first for that we're going to have further defining and discussion on November 9th. The next is dealing with the augmentation structure and funding. That was a really good discussion. What I'm going to recommend is that Warren and I chat more with Wade on how to incorporate all of this together so that it's actually helpful, and then we bring it back on the 9th for further discussion. And then to the last item, dealing with fallowing versus tax, having a deeper discussion looking at our criteria, whether we want to pursue a tax or, as was suggested, just a fallowing program. So some further comments. So now I want to go back. Kathy, do you want to make any comments on what the list I just gave and or process and so forth?
Cheryl, thank you very much. And I appreciate, start my video. I appreciate that you're trying to come up with kind of the low-hanging fruit here, I would say. Although I would also say if a criteria is that it has to get through the legislature, we're probably dead on arrival with anything. I mean, my perspective. This is really hard stuff, as you know. And as a member of the council, I would really like to see this committee focus on what I think are the two big issues. The first one is unreplenished groundwater withdrawals, which everyone is responsible for. All of our sectors are responsible for it: agriculture, municipal, and industrial. And DWR has quantified that over between 2012 and 2016, if you look at those numbers for all of the MAs, we have had nearly almost 5 million acre feet of unreplenished groundwater withdrawals. That's a huge number. And we've got to find a way to come to to terms with that. We can't keep that going in perpetuity. And I would say the same with groundwater as an assured water supply. We know that groundwater as an assured water supply is not sustainable. Groundwater is a finite resource. And DWR has already said that what has occurred in the Pinal AMA will occur in every other AMA in the future. So we need to deal with this issue. We need to figure out what we're going to do to fix what I think is a pretty significant problem, especially when we see that DWR has already allocated over 42 million acre feet of groundwater in the Phoenix AMA alone to assured water supply determinations. That's almost half. That's about half of the groundwater DWR estimates to be in storage. So I'm putting in a plug for future work of this committee to really start to deal with these two really big issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And you know, we were given this huge task, and we are, as you said, trying to move forward what we can in the times we are at. But we're not losing sight of anything that's been said. And you know, we appreciate all that. Spencer, back to your comment about adding the assured water supply to that stakeholder list.
I would just support a meeting on the 9th to review everything.
Yeah. So the 9th will have a little bit of a deeper dive on those issues, which is assured water. Well, I think just looking over all the package, but maybe hearing back on the definition of volumetric accounting, a little more on next steps on the augmentation structure, and if we have a decision to move forward with either the tax or the fallowing program. That will be on the 9th. And then whatever we agree upon and move forward, it would be presented to the full council on November 30th. And just another reminder that anything that would be legislated would have further stakeholder process down at the legislature. And then again, that list is in comments by Kathy. We will continue to move forward and in the coming year on these concepts because they're important and not to be, whether they're politically viable at this point and or meet our criteria, they're not going to be lost.
Cheryl, I just wanted to, I think that was a great summary, and I just wanted though to note that we did get also a request from for further discussion on the cuts of the aquifer with Tucson.
That's right. We'll be meeting with them.
So.
Any other comments or questions? Well, I don't see anything else. Do you, Warren?
I don't. I'm a little pleasantly pleased and surprised that it's that we're 15 minutes wrapping up 15 minutes early, but I just want to say it was a great discussion, a lot of very useful comments, very helpful for the whole committee as well as to us two co-chairs. So thank you everyone for participating and sharing. And so I think we can wrap this up.
We'll see you on the 9th. And as always, you can email Warren and me with any other comments. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.